So, this is what Ira Glass had to say about this when he, if I can find it. Okay. These American Lives. Ira Glass, Julie Snyder, and Lisa Pollock, producers of WBEZ, Chicago's public radio program, This American Life, were great editors for this section of the magazine. And Ira says, when the Times Magazine editors invited us to be a part of the annual Lives They Lived issue, they told us two things. One, they wanted us to be bold and shake things up. And two, Time readers really love this issue. Well, that was nice, he said. So we decided to try something that is not so different from what we do each week on the radio. For each person, rather than soup to nuts sweep of typical obituaries, we chose only one story from his or her life, an excerpt. As much as possible, we tried to get these stories in their own words or in the words of people close to them. Our hope was that the intimacy of this approach would bring us close to these people and help us hear their voices, get a feeling for who they really were. Many of the people we've chosen have done nothing that would normally get them into any magazine. If the premise of this issue is to tell stories about who has died this year, well, everyone dies. It's the most democratic experience of all, the one that unhappily we'll all take part in sooner or later. And of the hundreds of stories we considered, we were surprised to find that many of the ones we liked the most are from people talking directly about facing death, either their own or someone else's. These turned out to be very revealing stories, not maudlin or despairing, just clear-eyed and occasionally hopeful. This is, overall, a hopeful collection of people. And the first little excerpt is called The Anniversary. And this is the this is about Lou Ann Coy, who was born in 1932. This is a love story. Another spouse remembering a departed spouse. And it's told by her daughter, Mary Coy. She writes, after my dad died on August the 30th, 2001, my mother made sure we marked each anniversary. At first, my brothers and sisters and I would travel hours to get home, but eventually we got to the point where just one or two of us would make it back to go to Mass with Mom and spend the day together. The great love of her life, the man who broke up with her right before her college graduation, only to return 2 years later, claiming he'd traveled the world and hadn't found anyone to compare with her, remained a daily presence in her life. She spoke about him so often and kept his memory so alive that people were sometimes surprised to learn that he was not. She took over the garden he had planted and made it her own. When the 10th anniversary of his death approached, my mom began talking about it and planning for it weeks in advance. The date on her kitchen calendar was circled and marked R.I.P. Of course, she wanted all of us there, but she settled for my brother coming the day and my sister and me the following weekend. On Monday, the day before the anniversary, she went to morning mass and walked downtown for lunch with friends, and later told my sister on the phone that my dad still felt so close that as she was walking back home, she heard someone yell, and she thought, "Oh, there's Dick." That evening, she went out to water flowers, just as my father, 10 years prior, had gone out to the garden to pick vegetables before he died. A neighbor heard the tin watering can clank onto the cement as she fell and hit her head. My mother died within hours on August the 30th, 2011, the 10th anniversary. She needed to mark that anniversary. She wanted us all home, and my dad had waited long enough. Now, the next thing is a little different. It's an essay, and it's written by Isabel Wilkinson, and it's called A First Time for Everything. While poring over website legacy.com to prepare this issue, we noticed a trend. A search of the site database, which included obituaries for more than 750 newspapers across the country, turned up hundreds of obits published in 2011 with one phrase as a common thread. A single thread appears and reappears as headlines or as afterthought in the final words written by the families of more than 300 people who departed this earth in the past year. In each of these obituaries was a phrase that read something like this: the first Black American to, or the first African American. This thing is bothering me. Edgar King was the first African American milk delivery man in Gary, Indiana. Eddie Cougar was the first Black bus driver in the state of South Carolina. Camillus Wilson was the first African American meter reader for the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Nancy Hodge Snyder was said to have had the distinction of being the first Black registered nurse in Kalamazoo. I scanned the list, a spreadsheet of names and obituary excerpts, and cannot stop reading. How mundane the positions were, how modest the dreams had been. Added together, they somehow bear witness to how far the country has come and how it got to where it is. They speak to how many individual decisions had to be made, how many chances taken, the anxiety and second guessing at the precise instant that each of these people was hired for whatever humble or lofty position they sought. Walter Tharp was the first Black window dresser at the Wolf and Dresner department store in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Walter Lee was the first Black postal clerk in Winter Park, Florida. Bernice Ellis Riley was the first Black teller at First Federal Bank in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Thomas Reed Sr. was the first African American mold maker at Wheaton Glass Company in Millville, New Jersey. There are influential people on the list. The pathologist James Bowman, the first Black resident at St. Luke's Hospital in Chicago, and the father of White House senior advisor Valerie Jarrett was among those who died this year, as was Annette Samuels, the first Black White House spokeswoman under Jimmy Carter, and Matthew Perry, the first black United States District Court judge in South Carolina. But the lesser-known positions combined to make history with a lowercase h. At a post office in Saginaw or a police department in Poughkeepsie, when the country was opening up one position at a time to people who had been prohibited by law or custom from being what these people were trying to become. John Howard was the first black car salesman in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Adolph Hill was the first African-American garage door tech in Houston. Bayless Bingham was the first black female school bus driver in Newport News, Virginia. And Leonard Gates was the first African-American business agent for Heavy Construction Laborers Union Local 663 in Kansas City, Missouri. The more ordinary the first, the more petty the years of exclusion now seems in a world filled with black tellers and postal clerks. Each position was in its own way both a happy triumph and a sad reminder what it took to get there. Marshall Arnell was the first black teacher to be hired at Dover High School in Dover, Delaware in 1962. Eugene Smith was the first African-American licensed as a plumber and master electrician in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Travis Lucas was the first African-American paramedic for the Naval Station Great Lakes Fire Department in Lake County, Illinois. They ranged in age from 35 to 102, and most had gotten their jobs between World War II and the 1980s, although it wasn't until 1998 that Ralph Tyson, for instance, became the first black federal district judge for the Middle District of Louisiana. Jimmy Norcox was the first black reserve sheriff deputy hired in Gibson County, Maryland. Donald Dickerson was the first African-American firefighter in Statesboro, Georgia. Pressy Fentress was the first black mail carrier for the Gary Iron Foundry in Saginaw, Michigan. Eva McElroy was the first African-American voter precinct inspector in San Jose, California. And Marjorie Grievous was the first African-American woman to be licensed as a funeral director and an embalmer in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. When they were hired, most appeared to have been knew they were making history. The family of Alvin Taylor in Palmetto, Florida, described him simply as the first African-American in every appointment he attained. A woman named Dorothy Allen in Saginaw, Michigan, never knew of a black probation officer in her county, but in 1974 she applied anyway because she had a sociology degree, heard of an opening, and needed the job. Everybody knew who had which jobs, her husband Dempsey said. There could have been a judge's nephew out there that wanted that job. We were shut out time after time, but she went in there and she got it. They celebrated in Detroit that weekend, and decades later, he would put this line in her obituary: first black probation officer in Saginaw County, Michigan. Sonny Briscoe was the first black certified automobile mechanic in Cleveland County, North Carolina. Harriet Braxton was the first African-American female housing inspector in the city of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Wilbert Coleman was the first African-American narcotics detective in Hackensack, New Jersey. Sometime in the future, the phrase will be invoked for the biggest first of all, the first African-American elected to the Oval Office. A distinction that surely the first milk delivery man and the first postal clerk and the first business agent for heavy construction laborers union local 663 in Kansas City had, upon consideration, more than a little something to do with. And then a footnote says, Isabel Wilkerson, the author of The Warmth of Other Suns, is the first African-American woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for journalism. Now, the next little excerpt is kind of personal to me. When I was 23 years old, I was a bridesmaid in a wedding in New York City. And the bridesmaids' dresses were designed by Hattie Carnegie and made of French muslin that was all hand embroidered, and they were gorgeous. So when I came home, my mother said, I have engaged somebody to do your portrait in this dress because I want to see you at age 23 in this dress for as long as I live. So I set for this portrait. But you know, it wasn't as big as the one I'm going to read about in a minute, but it dominated whatever wall it was on in the house. And when Mother died, I brought it to my house, of course, and Al insisted that I put it at the foot of our bed, the wall that was at the foot of our bed, so it would be the first thing he would see in the morning and the last thing at night. Well, you know, I laughed about that. I said, I know there's a method to your madness. You want me to see it for the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night, and then look in the mirror and see how time has gone by. But anyway, I really had a dilemma about what's going to happen to that when I die. And this story says, can Mom stay with you? The painting is 6 feet tall, which is not so big for a gallery, but gigantic in a house. Also, it is of their mom. Sandra, Grace, and John would tease her about it. They called it the dartboard. I mean, it was just huge, John says. Just huge. And I'd bring friends over, and they'd be like, wow, that's like the biggest picture we've ever seen. Their mother, Irma Zelensky, posed for the picture when she was 19. She had done some modeling, and a portrait studio near their home on the southwest side of Milwaukee asked her to pose in her wedding dress. She was paid $4, and for years the painting was displayed in the studio until finally Irma's husband Joseph surprised her with the portrait as an anniversary present. It hung in the main stairway. All 3 children remembered that whenever the Zelenskys had company, Irma would walk over and quietly turn on the small light above the portrait to show it off. If we had company coming, Sandra recalls, someone would say, "Oh, I'll get the light, Mom," or "Mom, did you plug the light in?" And we would tease her. Irma died January the 31st, 2011, 5 years after Joseph, and 1 day after her 80th birthday. She left detailed wishes about some of her possessions, but her children say she conspicuously left no indication about what to do with the painting, which, as they told Ben Calhoun of This American Life, left them in a real quandary. Sandra said, I probably would have been the most logical one to have taken the painting, but my house is not big. I have a fireplace, but there's only a space for a little picture above it. I thought about having it professionally cut in half, just reframing her from the shoulders up, but it would have wrecked the whole thing. Grace said, the thing of it is that my mother was beautiful, beautiful her whole life. She was just drop-dead gorgeous. Even when the hospice nurses would come, even as weak and as skinny as she was, she'd take them downstairs to show them her portrait. All I kept thinking was that it couldn't end up in a dumpster. I wouldn't allow it to happen. It was my mom. I couldn't see it ended up in a Goodwill store. John said, I love the painting, but my house is so small, I don't have a wall big enough. I'd be covering a window or something. It is that big. It couldn't even go down in my basement. I'd lowered the ceiling down there, so I'd probably have to chop off a good foot of it just to hang it down there. Grace said, so I went to the computer and I typed in, what do you do with old portraits, or something to that effect. And this website comes up on the computer, and I thought, that's who I was calling. I started talking to this man and went into the whole story, and he said, you don't know who I am, do you? And I said, no. And he said, I'm with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and I would love to do an article on your mother. John said, I work at the 1885 John Mitchell Manor. It's a nursing home, assisted living. I'm the chief maintenance engineer over there. That's what I do. The day the article came out, our administrator called me and said, we need to talk. And they said, it's a beautiful picture. It would look very nice in the mansion if you'd be interested in donating it. And I said, yeah, definitely. I mean, the mansion is beautiful. Grace said, it is nice. It is a well-preserved Queen Anne-style mansion with fireplaces and huge ceilings. John said at first it was weird, emotionally, but I'm glad she's there. It's close to home. This way, if I ever do retire or quit, I can still go there and see it all the time. Yeah, I can see her every day. It's great. Not that I go to see her every day, but if I want to, you know, I can. She's with me. Grace said, I had a friend say that when your second parent dies, it's a feeling you can't describe, and now I know what it is. There are millions of decisions you have to make, and you hope you're making the right ones. And I think this was the right one. So, you think the Forested Duke would accept my portrait? I sincerely doubt it. Anyway, the next one is also dear to my heart because I was a teacher. Most of you know I taught second and third and combinations of second and third for many years. And of course, an elementary school teacher has to teach everything. She has to be an authority on absolutely everything. So, but I was the worst math student in the world. Oh my God. One of my teachers said, Delaina, don't ever take algebra again. So anyway, when I went back, I how I learned to understand algebra is really funny, because our daughter went to St. Mary's, and we'd go over for Parents' Day, and we went to classes with them. And so I went into her math class, and her teacher, Miss Burke there, explained algebra so beautifully that at my advanced age, I finally understood algebra. But when I went back to teaching after my kids went to college, I went back to teaching. So, well, I was very mindful of how I taught math because I wanted everybody to love math. And eventually, I was awarded the Elementary Math Teacher of the Year by the North Carolina Council of Math Teachers. And, oh, what a joke that was. But in my house, if you've been in my apartment or my home, you know, I had plaques all over everything for Al Buehler. And then there's this one little plaque that says Delaina Buehler on it. And it's hung in a very obscure place, but anyway. This is Mr. Geller, Richard Geller, who was born in 1946. When Richard Geller died, students put his catchphrase, "Math is number one," all over Stuyvesant High School in New York City, where he had taught. It was taped onto the lockers. It was drawn on a couple of desks. It was handwritten on T-shirts. In the classroom, Geller was passionate and intense and demanding. One student remembered her math grade was the lowest one on her report card, but it was a Geller grade, and it was the one she was the most proud of. Geller could have retired a decade before he died, but he didn't want to. He was a math teacher through and through. This is an edited and condensed version of a speech Geller delivered at Stuyvesant's graduation in June 2011. He died 4 months later. I would like to thank the graduating class for having chosen me as your faculty speaker. I wondered, why me? I have been teaching math at Stuyvesant for 29 years and was never chosen before. By the way, 29 is a prime number. There are exactly 2 factors for 29, 1 and 29. Maybe I was chosen for the approximately 5 basketballs that I have confiscated from students during your 4 years at Stuyvesant, or the 17 Frisbees I took away, or the 113 decks of playing cards, or the 257 cell phones I took away and took to the principal's office. In case you haven't figured it out, all these numbers are prime numbers. No, I don't think so. I think that you heard 3 months ago that I had metastasized melanoma cancer in my lungs, and that you wanted to honor me for my passion for teaching math. Thank you for honoring me. Even though through all my problems, the best part of my day is teaching math. I've been teaching math for 43 years, another prime number, and I still love it. I got lucky. I found a career that I really love. I've been to many junior high school and high school graduations as a teacher. However, the most important graduations for me were my children's graduations. Yes, I'm a parent of a son and a daughter. Teachers do it too, you know. Only when I attended my own children's graduation did I realize how special parents find graduation. So give your parents a break today. Thank them for everything they've done for you. Let them take lots of pictures. Spend time with them. Let them enjoy it. In fact, please stand up and turn around and face your parents. I have some homework for you. Assignment number 1, volunteer. Tutor for free. Volunteer to help a political candidate. Help your parents. Make dinner. Babysit. Say thank you. Give up your subway seat to someone who is elderly or disabled. Think of others. Assignment number 2, find a career that you can enjoy as much as I enjoy teaching math. You will be much happier with your life if you enjoy your job. And if your parents don't like what you choose, that's their problem, not yours. When they see how happy you are in life and career, they'll be happy for you too. Assignment number 3, is 2011 a prime number? I have loved being a part of your 4 years at Stuyvesant. I've enjoyed watching you grow physically, mentally, and mathematically. I leave you with the following words. Math is number 1. At 2 a.m. the day he died, Richard Geller woke from a deep sleep and opened his eyes and began to speak. His son, Jason, was spending the night in the hospital and tried to make out what his father was saying. These would turn out to be the last words Richard Geller ever spoke. And Jason said it was hard to understand him. Then I realized he was saying, take one and pass it down. Take one and pass it down. Are there any questions? Thank you. These, on the back cover here, you really should come and, well, you should come and see the picture of this 6-foot picture of this woman in her wedding dress too. But it does show